Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. If you can hear me, can someone just wave or raise their hand a little
Yes,
bit?
we
Thank
hear
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, but more importantly, thank you for having this conversation. As women, food insecurity affects us in a much different way as we are often the caregiver. We find ourselves being the provider of food, and we often find ourselves being the preparer of foods within our homes. As Phyllis said in her, and thank you for this introduction, I'm with the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina. However, throughout my career, I've worked with health and human service organizations where food insecurity definitely was a main topic when we looked at the root cause of the issues that we are trying to eradicate in our community. So before I begin, I just wanted to kind of conceptualize what food insecurity is. Often we get this image of food insecurity is opening the pantry and the pantry is bare, or we don't have certain things. But food insecurity, of course, is that. But in addition to that, food insecurity is not having access to sufficient food. We know that food is medicine. So not having access to healthy foods in many of our communities within our diocese are within food deserts where they don't have grocery stores that are within walking distance or easily to get to. Food insecurity is having to make the difficult choice between, do I buy groceries or do I buy medicine? Do I pay my living expenses? Do I pay for heating? So this is all food insecurity. Do I skip a meal because I do not have enough to have my 3 meals per day? So at the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina, we are a Feeding America partner organization. There are, I think, about 8 Feeding America partner organizations within North Carolina. So I will be speaking great from the perspective of Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina, which covers 34 counties in Central and Eastern North Carolina, which is a large part of the eastern and central part of our diocese. However, all of us here are touched by a food bank. So therefore, some of this information is very similar, and some of the statistics I share will be very similar throughout. Typically, what food banks do, the difference between food banks and pantries, is food banks provide food to the community, but they are essentially distribution centers. And with the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina, we work with over 700 partner agencies in the 34 county area to distribute food. We have a fleet of about 29 trucks. Some are refrigerated, and the food goes out to the community in that way. Our food bank has grown to have over 200 staff members to assist in this work, and we have over 160,000 donors, volunteers, and advocates for the organization. So essentially, a way that we make sure that we are eradicating hunger in our area is by we not only distribute food, but we also help people connect to SNAP benefits. We do job training and placement, workforce development, so people can make incomes to be able to purchase food. We also help with pathways to farming, in addition to purchasing food from local farmers, for many of which are women and minority-owned farmers that are local. Thank you. So looking at our challenge, and this is something that is really alarming, that in 2024, almost 2025, we are facing a worsening hunger crisis. It is the worst since the Great Depression, actually. If we look at the highest, that is the highest level in over 15 years throughout the state of North Carolina, 1 in 7 individuals overall experience food insecurity or at risk of experiencing food insecurity. Just in the service area of the food bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina, that equals 1 in 7 individuals. So if you visualize the street that you live on and you think every 7th house on your street, there could be someone that's facing insecurity and food insecurity. And then looking at that, 1 in 5 of those are children. And that even worsens over the summer months when children are out of school and do not have access to breakfast and lunch. 1 in 11 of those are seniors, and 1 in 5 are actually veterans. And the disparity even deepens when we look at racial disparity that exists. 1 in 4 Black households may be at risk of food insecurity. 1 in 5 Latin households, and 1 in 10 white households, which means that is double. The Black and Latin households are double that to white. So it's definitely a crisis that does have racial disparity there that is overwhelming. So the mission of the food bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina is simple. We want a future where no one goes hungry. We want a future where everyone has access, not just to food, but access to healthy food. As well as we have a mission to nourish our community, build solutions by addressing the root causes of hunger, as well as empower communities to advocate for healthier communities and access to food within their communities. And how do we go about that is quite interesting, and it's the same throughout the state, and it's definitely ongoing work when we equity, diversity, and inclusion is definitely at the top of what we do as we look closer at what the root causes of hunger may be and how food is different, being able to provide culturally appropriate foods, because that is also a form of food insecurity. If maybe you have access to food, but you don't have access to foods that are connect or align with your culture or your cultural beliefs. Also having conversations about how can we build solutions to hunger? How can we shorten food lines? Is it doing pop-up markets? Is it helping people learn to grow foods? Education, and as well as empowering our communities to advocate for healthier communities. So as I mentioned, when we nourish people, and we do have these over 700 partner agencies that actually over 7 million visits per year happen, and we are able to distribute over 90 million meals, and some of those are even ready to go. Something that we actually, in most food banks in our state, actually instituted was actually pop-up markets. And to go back to 2021, when the COVID aid that happened in 2021, we had a little bit over 450,000 people who were at risk of food insecurity in the 34 counties that Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina serves. Since then, that has grown to at least 560,000 because there aren't certain programs to be able to assist in that work, and it requires more hands on deck and more empowerment. And one way we do that is by empowering communities to be able to leverage infrastructure, public policy change, such as the Farm Bill, as well as investments in food system resilience. So when you donate or support to the food bank, give support to the food bank, a lot of people question, well, how does that work? What are we able to do? To put this in context, if you look at the graph, 51% of donations of money that come in through individuals, through plan giving, as well as through groups, both faith-based and civic, coming together, makes the majority of funding. And then, of course, we do have 28% that comes from governmental funding, and then foundations and businesses help. We build partnerships with food suppliers, both retail, local farms, in order to, and government, in order to provide food at a lower rate. The food bank is able to produce 5 meals for every dollar that is given. And 3% of that is administrative. And also when you donate food, as you see, a large part of the donation of food actually does come from local sources, both food drive as well as local farmers. And as I mentioned, it's very important to the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina that we are supporting farmers of color and women in our area and giving local food. So in last fiscal year, between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024, we were able to distribute over 114 pounds of food that comes in several different ways. And also culturally appropriate foods and healthy foods. Many people ask, well, how can I help and what can we do today? And there are several ways you can help. You can donate. As I mentioned, every dollar is able to produce 5 meals, and that multiplier is probably very similar in every area that is touched by a food bank. Volunteers of always, it takes many hands and different, regardless of your ability or what you're able to do, or even the amount of time that you have. Volunteering is very important. Food Bank of Central Eastern North Carolina definitely uses about 160,000 per year of volunteers. And of course, advocating, sending an email, reaching out to your legislator, educating what food banks do, educating people on the fact that hunger is real in our community, and it may not look the way that it looks in movies, but food insecurity is real.